Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. I'm David Farnes with the Canadian Advanced Technology Alliance, and you're joining us today for TechNOW. And today we're going to talk about the .ca Factbook. We're going to hear all kinds of information about trends that are happening on Canada's top-level domain name. Joining me today is Ryan Saxby Hill. He's the Communications Manager for the Canadian Internet Registration Authority, or CIRA, as they're known here. Thanks for joining me, Ryan.
Thanks for having me, David. Glad to be here.
And sitting in to observe today as well and maybe participate is CATA's President and CEO, John Reid. Hello, John. Give us a nod of the head there, a wave of the hand. Okay, so let's get into it, Ryan. You just published the this year's Factbook. You've identified quite a few interesting trends in the marketplace, and so let's maybe get into some of the facts. I noticed that one thing that's happened, not really a trend, but something that's happened recently, is the introduction of quite a few new generic top-level domains into the marketplace. And so, what have you observed with those new domain names?
Yeah, great question, David. This is probably one of the most important trends affecting the domain industry, and anyone who's sort of been following this knows that there's been a huge shift in the domain sector with the introduction of about 500 plus new top-level domains into the marketplace. So previously, where you used to be able to register just .com, .org, .ca, or your various country codes around the world, now you can register everything from domain names related to pornography to domain names related to the legal profession to realtor. We've seen .sucks launch this week. It's really been a complete upheaval of the domain industry. One of the interesting trends that we noted in this year's Factbook was even with 500 plus new domains, we're seeing significant resiliency in the sort of traditional domains, but there's kind of a bright spot for these new domain operators. We're seeing that domains related to cities or specific communities are really performing quite well. The top 10 of these new GTLDs, as they're called, is .Berlin, .London, .NYC, .Quebec within Canada has also gotten some significant traction. Last time I checked the numbers, they had about 9,000 registrations. But it's interesting that people are really looking for a way where they can give their online presence a local affinity within sort of a global marketplace. It's a fascinating trend and one I think we'll be tracking going forward.
That's really interesting how they are kind of the ones that are tied to geography are picking up and seem to be performing the best.
Certainly something Canadian cities should pay attention to going forward as well. We don't have a top-level domain for municipalities yet in Canada, so it'll be interesting to watch how various cities read this data as well.
So with all of these new domain names, I mean, how does that impact .ca? How's .ca performing?
Another good question, one near and dear to my heart, as the folks responsible for managing this. We've come through this process, I think, relatively well. We've got a very stable 2.3 million domains under management at the moment, so people are still expressing a desire to register .cas, and we're seeing relatively stable market share. We've got over 30% of the market in Canada. Our largest competitor is still .com, but we're not sort of entering this next phase in the domain industry with a lot of complacency, right? We know that we've got to keep the .ca's reputation for being safe, stable, secure, and reliable top of mind of Canadians, and that's partly why we're so interested in talking with your community and kind of keeping the discussion around .ca going.
And .ca really is kind of recognized as Canada's domain. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there's a couple of interesting things when we think about the brand affinity or the brand attributes of .ca. We tend to score relatively well around metrics around trust or willingness to do transactions, which I think really speaks to the idea that Canadians see a .ca as being a trusted place online. One of the things that your audience may not know is in order to register a .ca, there's actually a relatively stringent requirement towards a connection to Canada. So folks are required to be a Canadian citizen or be incorporated in Canada or have a permanent resident card for Canada. So it really adds a layer of protection, right? There's not a lot of, it's less likely that if you want to conduct an unsavory business practice that you want to go through that process of authenticating your citizenship or your residency with us.
Agreed, agreed. So, well, let's talk about some of the trends that you identified in the report, because they're quite interesting. One, of course, we like to spend a lot of time talking about is mobile. And so, what did you notice? What did they identify this year with respect to trends in mobile, and really around what I thought was fascinating around mobile commerce?
Yeah, mobile is, I think, the story of 2015. I mean, we saw Google embrace mobile this week with their news that they would provide preferential ratings to sites with mobile sophistication embedded in them and accessibility for mobile devices, which I think is a smart move given some of the trends we're seeing. Importantly, this shift to mobile, I think, is not new for this year, but what I've said in the report is really that this is the year that we've seen a deepening engagement with mobile. So where previously there was a smartphone and a feature phone market in Canada, now 75% of mobile subscribers are on a smartphone. That obviously increases the applications that they're able to take advantage of in that mobile environment. It's really a much more dynamic space. The types of functions of mobile devices that we saw increasing are also kind of fascinating. We saw 46% growth in photo and video sharing, and anyone who has someone under 16 in their household can probably testify that that Instagram and Snapchat and mobile photo sharing is really the application du jour. I mean, I'm an Instagram addict myself, so I'm a little biased, but it's obviously an important trend to watch. The other areas where the content has shifted is we saw huge growth in sports consumption on mobile, which is likely a testament to the amount of viewing time that people are doing on mobile, and then also use of maps and directions. So as more feature-rich smartphone subscriptions enter the market, people are sort of shifting the functions of those devices for them, and they're sort of taking on a more enhanced role in their lives. So what might have been a feature phone and a GPS sitting in your car is now just your smartphone.
And online video consumption, I mean, that's something I know the CRTC is wrestling with in the review of television in this country, broadcasting in this country, and there's certainly implications for the traditional cable distribution market.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one. We asked a series of questions specifically around consumption of online video in our study, and we see that this is probably not going to surprise you, but the hours spent streaming video correlate negatively with age. So we've saw a whopping 86% of Canadians in the 18 to 34-year-old cohort reporting that they spent some time streaming video. When you hit over 55, the over 55 demographic, that number drops to 53%, but still a significant majority. A majority of Canadians also now report streaming radio online. So it's not just video that's kind of taking off. It's also consumption of radio. The real sort of market implication for this, though, is for the cable sector. There's really, we're seeing a drop in both the folks that are interested in subscribing for cable, also an increase in the folks that are reporting that they're considering it. So of those with a cable subscription that responded to our study with the Strategic Council, we saw 30% were considering canceling that cable. And of those that didn't subscribe to cable, a huge majority of them cite the availability of online video as being a key factor in that decision. So as we've seen new entrants into the Canadian market, be it Netflix, Hulu, ShowMe, all of the various video platforms, Canadians are really taking advantage of those things and opting not to subscribe to traditional cable services.
Very interesting. So, John, I guess you and I are trendsetters because we're in that top demographic, but yet we're creating video. Now, we're not just watching video online; we're creating it here at CATA. I think the last area that I'd like to cover, Ryan, is really around digital adoption by SMEs, and you had some fascinating statistics that that you reported in the fact book in these areas, and really, maybe a little bit of a trend and maybe a little bit of a concern about how we're doing in the SME market in terms of web presence in Canada.
You're absolutely right, David. One of the sort of call to actions I think that comes out of this data is that small and medium-sized companies have to really take the opportunity that we're seeing for mobile commerce and mobile marketing and just digital commerce and digital marketing more generally very seriously. There's a widening gap in Canada between the large enterprises of 90+% of them have an online presence, where when we hit the small and medium-sized market, that number drops to just over 40%. What's really problematic, I think, about this is the growing opportunity that e-commerce represents in this space. So of the most recent data we could collect, which ended in 2013, but sort of speaks to the trend, we saw that the e-commerce sector in Canada increased from 122 billion to 136 billion. So the sector's growing. We want to really make sure that our small, medium-sized businesses are able to take advantage of that and have the web presence they need to deliver an e-commerce option for the consumers that are looking for them out there. Really, one of the things that I found most interesting out of this data as well is we're not just talking about traditional e-commerce in a store where someone might access it through their computer, but the emerging trend here is really purchasing behavior on mobile devices. Our data picked up an interesting point where 20% of our respondents in the 18 to 34-year-old cohort had reported making a purchase on a mobile device, which really, I think, speaks to the opportunity. We're seeing increases in the e-commerce market generally. With that needs to come sort of adoption of those technologies and web-based technologies by small and medium-sized enterprises to really seize that.
Great stuff, and and I would add to that just the use of mobile while consumers are in stores, price comparison, and even making mobile purchases while they're in another retail outlet. It's fascinating stuff.
David, this has been an excellent trends briefing. I didn't realize that really it's a discussion on branding, profile, and changes in how we deliver information to the customers. So I think it would be very useful as an educational tool to the community.
Well, thanks, John. I appreciate it.
Well, I think we've covered a lot, and so my advice to the audience out there: if you're a mobile junkie, if you're a digital junkie, you've got to get into this fact book and look at all the data that's in there. Some fascinating trends, things we've heard. Canadian municipalities, of course, through CATA, we do a lot of work with municipalities. Municipalities maybe look at getting your own domain name like a .berlin. We talked a lot about mobile and mobile presence and the need for SMEs to really look at that seriously here in Canada, and of course all the other trends that are in there. So, Ryan, fascinating stuff. Thanks very much for joining us today, and I know we plan to do some more videos with you on different themes. So thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, we'll look forward to talking again, David. Thanks so much. Thanks, John.
You're welcome. So this is Dave Farnes signing off for TechNOW. Thanks for joining us.